Hey guys, it's Jenna Potter and welcome to Publicifi. This channel is all about how to be a DIY musician. Today on the show, I have a very special guest, Scott Helman. He's a Canadian singer-songwriter whose debut single Bungalow went gold in Canada. Scott was lovely enough to join me for a chat over Juno Awards weekend to talk about his start in the music industry, his advice with working with record labels, and also some tips he's learned along the way as a professional musician. Just a little disclaimer before I roll the interview. This originally had me in it, but due to technical difficulties, I cut myself out, but you can still hear me talking every so often in the background, just so you know. Without further ado, here's my interview with Scott Helman.
My story is weird because I got recognized when I was very young. Like I was 15 and I was putting stuff online and like I mean I remember being like, hey, how am I going to do this? Because I knew I really wanted to be a musician. And the hard thing when you're young is like you're not going to get gigs. Like it's just so hard to play shows, especially when you don't have like a rehearsed set and you look young. Like people don't want to book you. So I was like, okay, well I got to use the internet then. So I just put stuff online, like these songs online, and I was lucky. I got noticed by someone that, you know, then they were like, okay, well let's see what we can do, and I got like kind of like a record deal, sort of very young. And then yeah, like I just basically wrote for 3 or 4 years, and I finally got to a place where I felt like I kind of knew how I wanted to sound and what I wanted to say, and then I put out a record called Augusta, and now I'm here. The whole thing was crazy. like and every day, at least when I was younger, like it was all about having that deal. Like it wasn't like I don't know, like it was just so crazy to have a deal so young, and so it never really went away for me, that excitement, until I got a little older, and then, you know, then it's like more about your art, and because you get used to working with a record label, but at the start I was like, I'm working with a record label, like that's so crazy. I was at my buddy's house, and the guy, his name was Terry Motionberg, he did all my videos for me when I was super young. And he called me, he's like, you sitting down? And I was like, yeah, why? He's like, because Warner Music Canada wants to, you know, have a meeting with you. And I was with my buddy, and he was like, what? We were like freaked out. So I've learned a lot of things over time that have, I think, helped me gain a perspective on like being a musician and being an artist that is outside of that whole, like, once I get a record deal that I'm going to be successful. Like it doesn't really work that way. I think a really important thing I learned, and like as I slowly started to realize that maybe getting a record deal isn't all that you need to do. You need to also be an artist and make music and really try. And really good advice I got was like, really early on in your career, I think there's going to be this thing you have to do, and it's like you have to compartmentalize things into two categories. One is what you're willing to compromise, and one is what you're not willing to compromise. And I think when you do that, what happens is it becomes easier to change and adapt, but then once you've changed, you don't look back and go, oh, I don't like this person that I've become, and I don't want to be this guy, because you know, you kind of like, you're like, okay, I know what, I'm going to have to change, because I have to get better, and I have to be smarter, but I also, like, you have to guide how you want to change. So that you look back and you go, okay, cool, like this is the person that I wanted to become. That makes sense. So really early on, it was like, okay, well, there's certain things about my lyrics and about my music that I don't like to compromise, and I know them, and in my heart I know what I don't want to let go. But there's other things that I'm like willing to, like let's try it. And sometimes you have to go outside of your comfort zone. At first it's going to be like, no, I'm changing. That's what makes me cool. But then maybe it's not. And maybe someone actually has a better way of you know, doing things. Because, you know, like, I realized early, like, the world is going to roll me in a million different ways, and I just have to do my best at trying to make sure that the person I become is something I can recognize down the road. Right. So that was really good advice. And Ron Lapata, who I work with at Warner, who I, like, wrote a lot of songs with, early on was like, look, we won't change this because we all know that that's what makes you you. But these lyrics, maybe we should change those because they're not so good. So yeah, I think not being too precious about your art, but yet still being precious about it is like a balancing act you always have to do. It very much depends on the format. Like if I'm playing just a solo acoustic gig, then I just put a lot of banter in there. Like I like to talk about my songs and I like to introduce myself. I don't really like seeing an opening act and the whole time being like, who is this person?
Yeah.
I want them to like talk to me. I like to do that. That's an element of my art that I like to connect with people about, is like how I wrote the song and why I wrote the song, because I think that's a massive part of what I do. Just trying to make people laugh. Sometimes it doesn't go well. Like I remember I did a show in Italy, and I just been doing the same set for a while, and it became kind of second nature. And then I was like, why are people laughing? And I was like, oh, because they all speak Italian. Like they have no idea what I'm talking about right now. And for like a full band set, like I think just giving it your all and showing that you care about your music as much as someone else might. Because if someone doesn't know you, I think what they really want to see is that you care. You give a shit about your music and you're there to make it.
Awesome.
Not make it big, I mean like make your art, but also make it big, why not? It's, the weird thing is when you're like alone. Like I was in like an Egg Smart, like in like a neighborhood that wasn't very like exciting. I was like sitting alone eating a breakfast because I had to go to a meeting or something. And I think Bungalow came on the radio, and I was just like, this is really awkward, because I know it's me,
but no one else
it's just
has
weird.
any idea.
Yeah, that's a weird feeling. But no, I don't find it awkward really. I think it's kind of funny. What reminds me that it's important is that like I'm giving, when I make music, I'm giving people something, and they don't have to like it, and when they do and they respond to it, like I owe it to them to have that conversation. And the more that you do it and the more you engage, the more you love it, because you're like, oh, like there's not this divide between me and my fan. Like what's a fan? I don't know. It's just a person that likes your music. So it's like I don't want to have that like barrier between me and my fans, and like there's this like weird thing. I just want it to be, we're all hanging out. I like Twitter because I like the way it works. I don't know why. I like the response is quick, and I just like Twitter. I usually like to talk. That's what I like to do.
Exactly.
Maybe a little too much. But so.
Well, at least you're limited to 140 characters then.
Yeah, that's true.
So you don't go those tangents.
Yeah, it's when you start doing like 4 in a row, like Kanye, that's when you're like, maybe I shouldn't drink and tweet. That's probably a bad idea. Maybe a painter or a visual artist, because that's kind of my secondary art.
Yeah.
And I think a really important thing for any artist is, and it also goes back to the social media thing, it's like, you gotta have other stuff that you love to do. And I think that the reason for that is because sometimes when an element of your art becomes your job, there tends to be, you're always battling like freedom versus like, compromising, like I said before. And I think like you gotta have something that you do, whether it's writing poetry or painting or dancing or whatever, making origami, I don't know.
Yeah.
But just something that's just your own thing, that nobody gets to touch, and someone could walk into a room and say, I don't really like how that looks, and you could just say, fuck you, I don't care. Sorry to swear, but screw you, I don't care. And I think that's really important.
Well, there we go. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Scott Helman. Just to let you know, his debut album is coming out on May 12th. It's called Hotel de Ville, and he already has 2 amazing songs that have already been released. I'm going to link them in the description below so you can check them out for yourself. Scott is actually one of my personal favorite musicians and definitely my favorite Canadian musician, so I really recommend you check out the songs. I have more interviews planned coming up, and also more of my traditional how-to videos, so please like or subscribe to this page so you stay updated on them when they come out. I'll see you in the next one.